How's it going, everyone? Hope you're having a good day. Today we got a pretty crazy story of this kid who almost gets kidnapped. It's a pretty intense experience, and I know you guys will enjoy it. So sit back, relax, subscribe if you're new, and let's just jump right into it. Real quick, all these episodes are on Spotify. It's the first link in the description. So if that's your preferred listening place, make sure to go there. They also go up there like 2 to 3 hours early. So either way, let's call the subscriber who submitted this story Zach. So anyways, Zach was pretty young at this point. He was probably like 10 or something. And Zach had an older brother who was 18, 19, like a pretty good difference in age, right? And Zach's mom couldn't be around to babysit Zach. So, Zach's mom went up to his older brother and was like, hey, I know like you're going out with your friend right now, but I need you to take Zach. Like I can't babysit him basically. And Zach's older brother was kind of putting up a bit of a fight. He wasn't like, saying no, but he's like, Mom, like, come on, my younger brother is going to make it so difficult for me to have fun. Like, he's just going to mess things. I don't want him to get involved in anything I'm going to do. But Zach's, mother kind of put her foot down and said, no, like, you can use the car to go out and hang out with your friend on one condition, and that's that you bring Zach. Like, do this for me, or else. So Zach's older brother was eventually like, all right, fine, whatever. And he goes over, he finds Zach, he's like, hey, man, like, you're coming with us. So Zach goes over, sits in the backseat of the car, and Zach's older brother drives around until he gets to the place where his friend is. His friend hops in the car, and his friend looks at Zach's older brother with kind of like a smile. He turns back and looks at Zach in the back seat, and he kind of turns back with kind of a look of like, what's this kid doing here? But then very quickly, like, puts a smile back on his face. He's like, hey, I didn't know you'd be joining us. And Zach's older brother kind of like piped up a little bit and said, yeah, sorry, like my mom couldn't, look after him. So he has to kind of come around to wherever we're going. And, Zach's friend, or Zach's older brother's friend, kind of looked at him with a kind of a look because maybe they were going to do something that they didn't want their younger brother with them at. And basically Zach's older brother kind of looked at him with a look of like, it's fine. Like, I'll deal with it. Don't worry about it. So they're driving along, and they're driving kind of towards this woods forest type area. Wasn't like in the middle of like, I don't know, the middle of a massive forest or something, but it was definitely on the outskirts of whatever civilization, humanity type town or whatever they were in. So you'd see like, a house or two every once in a while, but it started to be pretty woodsy, pretty foresty. And they pull into this parking spot, and Zach's older brother looks at his friend, and then, Zach's older brother looks back at Zach and says, hey, man, like, do you have something to entertain yourself with? And Zach looks around. He finds some kind of like Star Wars book or something. I don't really know. He finds something that he would find entertaining. And he's like, yeah, no, I can handle myself. And so Zach's older brother's like, hey, man, like, we're going to be gone for like 20 minutes. Can you just chill out here for a little bit? Like, can you just chill out here? Is that fine? And Zach was like, yeah, man, that's totally fine. It's whatever. And so Zach's older brother and his friend get up and they go. And whatever they were going off to do is, who knows? I mean, you can probably guess or make guesses or whatever. It's a whole host of things that maybe, just think of something. There's a whole host of things that you would do with your friend when you're older, or groups of friends or whatever, that you maybe didn't want your little brother there the whole time. There's a bunch of things. I didn't get specifically something. But the thing is, right, Zach, even though he was told to just stay put, it wasn't that he was a disobedient child. He just got bored, and he didn't really think of the consequences, because, you get that, prefrontal cortex that hasn't fully developed, and especially by the time you're 10, you barely have your spatial awareness there. So, sure enough, Zach is sitting there. He's looking at this coloring book, or Star Wars book, or whatever he was looking at to keep himself entertained. And, he got bored. I mean, understandably, he got bored. After about 5 minutes, he went through the entire book, because this book was sitting in the back of his car. He's looked at it several times. Like, this isn't some new, interesting book. He's seen it a billion times. So he kind of puts the book down. He looks out the window, looking to see if, his older brother's coming, but he sees no sign of them. And Zach's like, all right, well, I don't know. Like he said, I have to stay in the car. He didn't say anything about, I can't get out of the car as long as I stay near it, which, I mean, I'm sure Zach's older brother implied stay in the car, but whatever. Either way, Zach did enough mental gymnastics to convince himself that it'd be totally fine for him to get up and get out of the car. So sure enough, he gets up and he gets out of the car. He starts walking. And just for a bit of context, right, they were in kind of a wooded area, but there was a very long kind of driveway path, and there was also kind of like it was cutting through a field, which if you walked far enough in the direction of the field, there was a forest on both sides. So there's like multiple paths along these fields that you could go into the forest, but there was a main dirt path that was it was the road, right? It was kind of like the road that it wasn't paved, it wasn't looked after. It was definitely in the middle of nowhere type road. I don't know if you've seen one of those, but Zach is just kind of walking around, and he's just walking along the road, and he's not even really paying attention to how far he's walking away. I don't know about you, but especially when I was a little kid, there were plenty of times, and I mean plenty of times, that I would just be like walking in my head, even now, honestly, and I just kind of like pay attention. Like I kind of look up and I notice that like, oh wow, I've been walking for 20 minutes in like this direction. I had no idea I was doing this. And sure enough, right, Zach was just walking, and he probably didn't even realize this, but he kind of looked up and he realized that the car was no longer in sight while he was just walking a straight direction. So he definitely wasn't lost or anything. He realized that he's probably been walking for like 5+ minutes. So he's like, okay, I should probably turn around. And that's when this car starts there's no traffic on this road. No one really drives along on this road. And that's when this car is kind of, it's not like a white unmarked van that says free candy on the side. It's not exactly like that, but it's kind of a more beat up, non-descriptive car it looks a little sketchy, but whatever, right? I mean, everyone has their first, whatever, you don't judge a book by its cover unless it says free candy on the side of the car, then go ahead and do it. And Zach just noticed this, and the car drives up next to him. And there's a lot of things wrong with this car. Zach realized as the car kind of like drove away, which happens a little later, that it had no license plate, which that's a big red sign right there. There was like tinted window. A lot was wrong with it. So the car pulls up, and Zach is just kind of like walking along, and this driver slows down, which is the first weird thing, because like if you're just driving by, it's whatever. Maybe slow down a little bit just in case, I don't know, the kid or the person walking by makes any sudden moves, but most of the time you just don't think to do so. So the driver like pulls up and he kind of slows down. So Zach realizes that this driver is probably gonna try and talk to him. So Zach, turns his head, and sure enough, the driver is is putting down the window in the car. And the driver's like, hey, buddy. And Zach immediately gets the chills. Like he's been told in school by this point, he's had it drilled into his head. If any stranger comes up to you and tries to talk to you, like you're okay talking back, but like you can't, like if they say, come with me, or you should go this way, anything like that, just avoid it. You don't want to be kidnapped or something. He's been told a billion horror stories about kids being kidnapped and never being seen again. So sure enough, Zach is pretty freaked out by this. And the guy in the driver is like really slows down his car almost to a stop. And he's like, hey, like, where are you going? Like, why are you walking along on this road all by yourself? Zach, who's, he's only 10, so he's not like thinking of like the perfect mastermind thing to say to get himself out of this. But he's kind of like, oh, I'm just going to see my brother. And the guy's like, oh, your brother, is your brother around right now? Is he close by? And Zach knew better than this. So he said, yes, my brother is close by. And the guy's like, oh, well, I mean, I don't see him anywhere. Do you know what direction he's in? And Zach points ahead of him because that's the direction of the car. And the guy's like, do you want to lift there? Yeah, I mean, just hop in the back seat. I got you on this one. And Zach looks at him and says, it's okay. Like, I enjoy the walk, right? And, the guy's like, are you sure, man? Like, are you 100% sure? And, he's like, yeah, no, I'll be fine. So the guy's like, okay, that's fine. And he drives off. At this point, Zach is really starting to freak out a little bit. And the car has driven off at this point, but he just feels really weird. And he starts kind of like power walking back to the car. And at this point, he's like, okay, this was really strange. This was really weird. I have a bad feeling about this. About 3 minutes later, and he's power walking back to his car. And it turns out he actually had been walking away from his car for like 10 minutes, not 5. So he was much farther away than he thought. So what happens, right, is he's walking and he hears a car behind him. And he turns around and he sees the exact same car coming back, but this time much faster. So what, Zach just had an intuition to get off the road. So what happens was as I was saying earlier, there's the road bisects a field. And if you go far enough into the field, there's a woods. So it's like all surrounded by woods, but there's a field that bisects the road, or the road bisects the field. and there's many paths off the road into the field, and Zach just got a feeling that he needs to get on one of those paths. So these paths are not the roads; they're just paths that lead through the fields into the woods, that the road goes in between. So Zach immediately gets on one of these paths and starts walking, and he turns around and he looks and he sees the guy who's like driving that car park his car in the middle of the road and open it and start like not sprinting, right? He's not sprinting, but he is like quickly moving towards Zach at this point. Like he is power walking with emphasis. So Zach turns around, sees what's happening, and knows immediately like, okay, this is really bad. So Zach at this point starts running, and he just starts running, and he doesn't even look back. He's just running and running and running, and that's when he gets to the woods. And that's when Zach, catches his foot on a root, because I don't know if you've been in the woods before, but there's a lot of like tree branches, bushes, and also exposed tree roots. And some of them, like the only part like is like it's poking out, you don't really see it. And sure enough, Zach caught his foot on this and he fell over. So he fell over, he quickly got up, but while he was getting up, he did look behind him, and the guy in the vehicle was quickly approaching, and he was no longer power walking, he was sprinting towards him. Real quick, if you made this far into the video, comment Zach down below. Sorry, I can't think of anything that interesting to say. I'll try and heart a bunch of comments to say that. Also, please let me know what you're doing while watching these videos. The best way you can support the channel is by sitting down and watching multiple videos. If you want to submit stories to me, do so on either my Instagram or Twitter. They're both in the description. Go to the Spotify playlist if you haven't, or the Spotify podcast if you haven't already. Please rate it 5 stars, by the way. That's a little feature on there. It says rate, and then you can choose how many stars. I mean, it'd be cool if you give it 5, that'd be pretty nice. And with that being said, let's get right back to the video. So sure enough, Zach just starts sprinting. And before, like, he was running, at this point, like, survival instincts have kicked in at this point. He is full-on sprinting. This guy is out of here. He's like, no, I can't be doing this, man. Like, no shot am I being kidnapped today. No way. And the other thing was, Zach knew that he was kind of close to the car. Like, he knew that, like, if he could get back on the main road, if he could leave this guy, like, into the woods and get back onto the main road, that, like, I don't know, like, maybe he would at least, or he needs to at least follow the woods, like, parallel to the main road, and then at some point get off of it and, try and get into the car, try and see where, his older brother is. Remember, he's too young at this point to have a phone. And also, this was a little while ago, so, like, phones weren't so common that, like, everyone, including little, like, I don't know, 4-year-olds had them. And anyways, he's in the woods and he's running. And it's hard because there's no real pre-made path in the woods. And I guess the one advantage, or one of the advantages Zach had, was he was, like, 10. He was short. He was small. And because he was short and small, he was, he was actually very agile, very mobile, and he was able to kind of weave his way through all the brush and random stuff in the forest much better than the guy chasing him. The guy chasing him, who was I don't know, a bigger, like, guy who was probably in his 40s or whatever, and because of that, he was being, he couldn't just run through all the brush. He can't run through a tree. And he was kind of getting caught up and stuck or whatever, and it got to a point where Zach turned behind him, and he didn't even see the guy anymore. He knew he was coming because he could kind of hear noises of rustling or whatever, but you couldn't even see him because he got that far back. So Zach eventually decides that this is a good time to break out of the trail. He breaks out of the woods, starts running into the field, isn't even on a path in the field. He's just going through the tall grass at this point, running and running and running until he hits the road. At this point, he's hit the road, and he starts looking in both directions, and he can see very, very far in the left or straight ahead of him at this point. He sees an outline of a car, and he recognizes the color. It's like this maroon color, and that is the color of his, his older brother's car. And he also sees 2 figures outside the car kind of pacing around. And yes, they could have been more kidnappers or whatever, but most likely they were Zach's older brother and his friend, probably freaking out because Zach was nowhere to be seen. So Zach is like racing up towards them. Zach is like sprinting, and he's like yelling, and he sees the other 2 figures, like one like turns around, he hears his name being yelled, which at this point he's like 100% sure it's his brother, because this random kidnapper, unless he's been stalking him for like 2 years, definitely doesn't know his name. So Zach, as he gets closer, he sees it is his older brother and his friend. He goes up there, he's like, oh my God, like I can't, like there's someone after me. And like Zach's older brother's like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? And, Zach goes on to explain that, like, yeah, like, this guy came up to me, said, like, he could drive me to you, but I said no. He disappeared for a little bit, But now, I don't know, he's been chasing me. Like, he got out of his car, he's chasing me in the woods, and they're still, like, they got the guys in the woods right now. I don't know what's really happening. And Zach's older brother's like, all right, man, let's get in the car, let's get back home. Like, we'll sort through this all when we get back home, but right now, like, let's just get back to safety. So they start walking up to the car, and, you know, Zach is about to get in when they look down the road and they see another car coming up to them. And Zach immediately yells at his brother, "That's the car." So they quickly hop into the, like, Zach gets in the back seat, Zach's brother gets in the driver's seat, and his friend gets in the other seat. They get in the car and they immediately drive out of there. The thing is, though, like, the car that, like, was chasing Zach before was far enough away, because this road was it was a very flat terrain, so you could see far ahead of you could see the horizon pretty far away. So by the time Zach's older brother, and his friend got into the car and they started to move, they had a good amount of distance on the other car. Obviously, if they just stayed put, the car would have caught up with them, and who knows what have ever happened. But Zach was in the back seat, looking at the car behind them, basically telling them, all right, is the car speeding up? Is it getting closer? And sure enough, for at least a little bit, like in the very beginning, the car was like going 80 miles per hour, and he was like speeding up towards the car that Zach had. And, you know, he's telling his older brother, like, you got to go faster, you got to go faster. His older brother's like, man, I don't know, like, this is way over the speed limit. And Zach's like, look behind you. So he looks in his mirror, and sure enough, the car is getting closer and closer. And he's like, dude, this guy's a maniac. So Zach's older brother's like, all right, screw it. He steps on the brake, or not the brake, steps on the gas. They start driving faster, and eventually they get more and more into civilization until they hit a highway, which is exactly, they get in the highway, they go on, and they've lost this guy. There's no way that this guy follows them on the highway. I was about to say, or so they think, but no. They get back home, the guy's not following them. You know, Zach's older brother sits Zach down, is like, dude, what happened? Like, what happened today? Zach, like, catches his breath because he's, like, freaking out. He's like, all right, I'll tell you
Click on the
everything.
video on screen right now. I know you'll enjoy it. Just click it, do it.